The National Desk, America's News, now.
Harris and Trump hit the campaign trail in the battleground states, where each team is targeting today with just over 2 months to go in the election.
The male then exited his vehicle, and at that time he raised the firearm.
A deadly encounter on I-95 in New Hampshire.
State troopers responded with deadly force.
The gruesome find troopers saw after a shootout on the highway. And then a temporary fighting pause announced in the Middle East. What led to the agreement and why Israel says it's not a ceasefire.
This is the National Desk, America's News. Now, I'm Dee Dee Gatton. Thank you for joining us. And we begin tonight with severe weather alerts in the mid-Atlantic, parts of Louisiana, Nebraska, and Iowa. But the worst of it all could be in Minnesota tonight. The National Weather Service has a severe thunderstorm watch until 9 p.m. Central and is warning of flash floods, large hail, and possibly a few tornadoes. You can see the very active system behind me. And as you take a look right here at this map, record-breaking heat continues in the Midwest and on the East Coast. More than 20 million Americans are under heat alerts as high temps in Tennessee, North Carolina, and Kentucky could set new marks today. Already this week, all-time highs have been set in Chicago, Mississippi, and Washington, D.C. Meantime, in the Pacific, Gilma has weakened to a tropical depression, but is still on target to pass closely by Maui early tomorrow morning. Still packing winds of about 35 miles per hour. The storm will bring heavy rains to the island state. Gilma will continue to weaken as it passes by. The National Hurricane Center predicts Gilma will be post-tropical as it passes by Kauai on Saturday. The remnants of Tropical Storm Hector have dissipated, and that's not a threat to any of the Hawaiian Islands. Vice President Kamala Harris and her running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, are in Georgia today and will conduct their very first interview with the press since officially becoming the Democratic nominees. The pair sat down with CNN's Dana Bash this afternoon to define their presidential campaign.
Generally speaking, how should voters look at some of the changes that you've made, that you've explained some of here in your policy? Is it because you have more experience now and you've learned more about the information? Is it because you were running for president in a Democratic primary? And should they feel comfortable and confident that what you're saying now is going to be your policy moving forward?
Dana, I think the most important and most significant aspect of my policy perspective and decisions is my values have not changed.
The entire interview airs tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern on CNN. Former President Donald Trump is campaigning in two major battleground states today. He visited Potterville, Michigan for a rally this afternoon.
The only good thing that she's flip-flopping. She's the greatest flip-flopper. Things that she never even thought of. She probably goes back to her room and gets sick to her stomach when she says what she has to say, because she's a Marxist.
Next, Trump will hold a town hall in La Crosse, Wisconsin this evening. The former president focused on spurring up support in states he won in 2016, but then narrowly lost in 2020. An Arlington National Cemetery official confirms they were abruptly pushed aside during an altercation with Trump's staff during a wreath-laying ceremony on Monday. An Army spokesman says a female employee was trying to make sure everyone participating in the ceremony was following cemetery rules. Two Trump team members verbally abused and pushed the official, we're told, when she was trying to stop one of Trump's photographers from entering a restricted area. The incident was reported to the police, but the employee is not pressing charges. Trump's team is downplaying it, saying the photographer was allowed to be there.
There happened to be a camera there, and somebody gave him permission to have that camera there. This is not a gross violation of federal law. This is a president who did what all presidents should do: show up and provide support to your own people.
The cemetery says federal law prohibits political campaign photography on site, even if families give their own permission. The ceremony was to honor the service members killed during the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. 3 people are dead after a domestic dispute followed by an officer-involved shooting this morning. Police say they were on an I-95 bridge between New Hampshire and Maine when a man they'd been pursuing in the killing of his wife got out of his car and raised a weapon. 3 troopers shot at the man and he fell into the river. Police then found an 8-year-old shot to death inside the car.
Based on information we saw, it was very clear that the officers that were involved in the shooting did not fire on that child.
The Coast Guard later recovered the man's body from the river. The Howard County Police Department in Maryland has released this photo of 17-year-old William Marshall III, who is wanted for the murder of another 17-year-old, Angelo Little. Police say Maryland law usually prohibits identifying a juvenile suspect, even if charged as an adult, but an exception exists if the apprehension of the suspect ensures public safety. Police say that Marshall is a danger to the community and his whereabouts are unknown. A $10,000 reward is being offered for any information leading to an arrest. FBI officials investigating the attempted assassination of former President Trump have released photos of evidence and new information about the shooter's activities in the days leading up to that Pennsylvania rally. The National Desk, Acha El-Nashar reports.
In the multiple investigations into the Trump rally shooting in Butler, Pennsylvania, the questions keep piling up.
How could this not have been prevented?
At this point, a lot more questions than answers.
It's true for the members of Congress investigating and, to some extent, the FBI, which still hasn't determined the shooter's motive. We are learning more about Thomas Matthew Crooks's internet history, which the FBI says gives insight into his mindset. A week before the rally on July 6th, Crooks searched "Where will Trump speak from?" at Butler Farm Show, Butler Farm Show podium, and Butler Farm Show photos.
We also know from his internet searches that he looked up how far was Oswald from Kennedy. What do you make of all of that?
This is someone that put a lot of thought and effort into making the most of his opportunity to shoot President Trump.
The FBI also just revealed that last September, Crooks searched Trump's campaign schedule and his upcoming visits to Pennsylvania. And up until the day before the shooting, was looking up both Trump and President Biden's schedules, including the dates of the Republican and Democratic national conventions. Former Special Agent Rich Staropoli, who spent 25 years in the Secret Service, explains why officials believe Crooks saw the rally as a target of opportunity.
He simply picked the easiest one that allowed him the greatest opportunity to be successful. And his success was measured in, would he be able to kill either President Trump or the sitting president, Joe Biden?
We're also getting a closer look at Crooks's backpack and rifle disassembled for transport, and how it was discovered on site, and the improvised explosives found in Crooks's trunk.
This kid wasn't planning on stopping there. Had he made it off that roof and back to his vehicle, who knows what else he was planning to do with those explosives.
Now, in addition to determining a motive, the FBI is also trying to figure out if Crooks had any co-conspirators. We know there wasn't a second shooter, but the Bureau is still trying to figure out if there were any co-conspirators. There's no evidence right now of that, but they're, of course, still investigating.
And also, Acha, the bipartisan congressional task force we know is also investigating this, just requested more information from the Department of Homeland Security. What are they looking for?
Right, so they've just asked DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas and Secret Service Acting Director Ronald Rao to send them all transcripts of the interviews that they've conducted related to the shooting, all of their internal inquiries, documents related to the Secret Service's intelligence advance process, security planning, site selection. There's a lot of questions about why it was allowed to be held at that site so open, and then also any communication they had with contractors and local law enforcement. They're also wanting lead agents who were there, part of the planning of that rally, to be made available to the task force for transcribed interviews.
All right, live from Washington, D.C., Acha El-Nashar, thank you so much. Right now, a Florida inmate set to be executed. 57-year-old Loren Cole is convicted in the 1994 murder of a college freshman and rape of the student's sister. The U.S. Supreme Court denied a request from Cole's lawyers to halt the execution because Cole has Parkinson's disease, which they argued would make it impossible to be humane. Cole was scheduled to be put to death as soon as 6 p.m. Eastern. Former Florida Deputy Eddie Duran has been granted a $100,000 bond to be released from jail while he waits for trial. Duran is charged for the killing of senior airman Roger Fortson in May. Body cam footage shows Duran shooting Fortson at the airman's home when Fortson answered the door holding a gun. Eddie Duran was fired from the sheriff's department when an internal affairs investigation said deadly force was not reasonable in that situation. The Federal Aviation Administration is investigating a serious flight disruption that injured 7 passengers. A United Airlines flight from Cancun to Chicago yesterday was diverted because of what the airline called severe turbulence. The crew reported the turbulence over Louisiana, then landed in Memphis, where one person was taken to a hospital. With a near unanimous vote, United Airlines flight attendants who are part of the AFA union authorized a strike as they seek higher wages and schedule and retirement flexibility. This does not mean a strike is imminent. The union will now need to file a release request with the National Mediation Board, requiring a 30-day cooling off period before any work stoppage could begin. Tonight, police in Aurora, Colorado, they are calling recent violence associated with a Venezuelan street gang a, quote, isolated incident. But it's raising fears once again of a surge in crimes committed by migrants hundreds of miles away from the border. As the National Desk's Christine Frizzell reports.
It's a scene that seems to be out of a developing nation where corruption and violence run rampant. But this surveillance video is from an apartment complex in Aurora, Colorado.
To your knowledge, what are the men in this video doing?
They are going through the complex, like I am told that they are, heavily armed. They patrol the complex. They control who comes in, who goes out. They go from door to door. They have forced their way into many complexes. They have thrown people out.
Aurora City Councilwoman Danielle Jurinsky blames neighboring Denver for its sanctuary policies, which provides services to undocumented migrants, the vast majority not connected to crimes and there to find work. Those seen in this video, though, believed to be associated with the violent Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua, designated by the U.S. Treasury Department as a transnational criminal organization, closely watched by the FBI.
We're certainly tracking that particular gang, TDA, as we would refer to it, whether it's their, drug trafficking, extortion, kidnapping for ransom, different kinds of violent crime.
4 Venezuelan migrants associated with the same gang were just indicted for this jewelry store heist in Denver. 2 others believed to be involved in the attack of New York City police officers in Times Square in January. And the suspect in the murder of Laken Riley has connections as well. Venezuela and some other countries have no diplomatic relationship with the United States, which means information about migrants' backgrounds would not be shared.
We have no ability to verify their criminal background or whether they belong to a Venezuela gang, but yet we're still releasing them in the United States.
Former President Donald Trump says if he wins the election in November, he'll implement a mass deportation policy. Vice President Kamala Harris has indicated a shift on border policy with support for a more restrictive approach. In Washington, I'm Christine Frizzell.
Coming up, the new information that shows the economy is stronger than analysts originally thought. Then, the critical role the U.S. intelligence community played in stopping a terror attack on a Taylor Swift concert this month. Then, how police in Washington were able to solve a 44-year-old murder cold case. We're back in 90 seconds. The U.S. economy is stronger than we thought. Its growth last quarter has been revised to a 3% annual pace. The Commerce Department originally thought it was around 2.8%. Economists attribute this to strong consumer spending and business investment. Despite high interest rates, mortgage rates seem to be dropping, though. Freddie Mac just said the average rate on a 30-year mortgage fell from 6.46% last week to 6.35% this week. Freddie Mac's chief economist said that's because people are expecting the Fed to cut interest rates soon. The number of Americans filing for unemployment benefits also fell slightly. The Labor Department says jobless claims declined by 2,000 to 231,000 last week. They remain low by historical standards. Dollar General shares are down almost 40% today, dropping sharply after the company cut its sales and profit guidance for the year. Earnings per share are now expected to be only around $6, more than $1 lower than the previous outlook. The CEO said he thinks customers are spending less because they're struggling financially. In the Mideast, a ceasefire deal remains elusive, but the United Nations announced today a limited pause in fighting beginning on Sunday in certain areas of Gaza to allow for polio vaccinations to be administered. Last week, the first case of polio was confirmed in Gaza in over 25 years. Israel has allowed more than 2.8 million doses of the vaccination into Gaza, but the situation on the ground makes it nearly impossible to get it to those in need. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu clarified that military operations will continue, but a few designated areas are off limits for 3 days. In the West Bank, Israel has continued their counterterrorism operations in the cities of Jenin and Tulkarm. At least 12 Palestinians have died in the fighting, including an Islamic Jihad military commander killed today, who Israel claims was the most wanted terrorist in the West Bank. Palestinian parliament members condemned the operation, saying Israel is just trying to maintain military rule over the land.
What we need to end this cycle of violence is to end the Israeli military occupation, which has lasted so long.
And in the Red Sea, the Houthis have released a video of their rebels boarding and setting explosives upon a Greek-flagged oil tanker. The Houthis attacked the tanker last week before the crew safely abandoned it. The tanker contains about 1 million barrels of oil, and UN officials are warning of an environmental catastrophe to wildlife in the area if there is any leakage or spill. A top Chinese military officer says the United States must stop what he calls collusion with Taiwan. That's what one of the vice chairs of the Central Military Commission told White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan today. Sullivan's trip to China was aimed at keeping the U.S. and China in communication. He said the goal in engaging with China is to deliver for Americans.
We believe that competition with China does not have to lead to conflict or confrontation. The key is responsible management through diplomacy.
The U.S. intelligence community played a critical role in preventing a terror attack at a Taylor Swift concert in Vienna earlier this month. The CIA's Deputy Director, David Cohen, said his agency told Austrian authorities about the ISIS-inspired plot ahead of time.
They were plotting to kill a huge number, tens of thousands of people at this concert, including, I'm sure, many Americans, and were quite advanced in this. The Austrians were able to make those arrests because the agency and our partners in the intelligence community provided them information.
4 people were arrested in connection to the plot that led Swift to cancel her Vienna concerts. She thanked authorities in an Instagram post last week. Roughly 40% of all Americans will suffer from sciatica at some point in their life. That's according to the Cleveland Clinic. Medical reporter Liz Bonas has some tips on a few simple stretches that might be the secret to beating the pain.
Hey there, everybody. Sciatica pain, one of the most common complaints we have these days, according to physical therapists, and it can be caused by a number of things.
So sciatica pain is typically like a shooting or a tingling pain down your leg.
Courtney Neeson of Ohio's Mayfield Brain and Spine says this kind of pain comes from this side nerve, the sciatica.
This is your sciatic nerve here.
Pain occurs, she says, when the roots to the sciatic nerve, which runs down your legs, becomes pinched. It can happen from a number of things, including how you sit at your desk.
We always like to say feet flat on the floor. So bring your feet underneath you a little bit, and that can take some of that stretch off of that nerve that goes down the leg as well.
But she says a few exercises can also help, like this one that strengthens your core or center muscles, or one that looks like this that helps stabilize your hips. And she says several stretches, or what she prefers called nerve glides, can also work.
Just kind of a little bit of background on nerves. We always compare them to dental floss and how when you floss your teeth, you want it to go kind of back and forth without getting stuck on anything. So your nerves are very similar in that they do move, but they're a little different than muscle, where muscle will stretch, but a nerve doesn't really like to be stretched. It does have a little bit of a give to it, but its job is more so to move along its pathway rather than kind of stretch and come back together.
If you do need help learning some of these moves, your doctor can refer you to a physical therapist. With your health news, I'm Liz Bonus reporting.
Coming up, the future of farming, the new technology that's improving agriculture through healthier soil. We'll be right back. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. We're taking the pulse of America, and we start in Maryland, where new technology is
stepping off the wagon and taking their seats. These farmers are heading to a classroom in a cornfield.
Today we're having our what we call a crop showcase.
A crop showcase hosted by the mill in Whitehall, taking a look at new tools of the trade.
We're always constantly looking for the next best thing.
They're teaching farmers about soil like this so they can grow more crops and use less fertilizer to better protect our waterways.
The whole goal of it is focused around improving soil health, also ultimately reducing the nutrients that might get into the bay.
Ben Hushin, a partner with the mill, says some of those tools to help improve soil include drones like this, different types of fertilizer and biologicals, tools they're currently trialing and testing out on crops.
Sergeant Tim Ford choked back tears following this, the biggest break of his career.
But once I got into it, I couldn't put it down.
It was back in 1980 when 30-year-old Dorothy Silzel was found strangled in her Kent apartment. A devastating loss for her family. They say she lived and breathed a motto of kindness every single day.
She was a hugger for Special Olympics and is missed by all.
Police say they found DNA at Dorothy's crime scene, yet it wasn't until the last few years when advancements in technology allowed investigators like Sergeant Ford to make progress in this case. And earlier this month, critical DNA was matched to this man, Kenneth Kunder.
The Iron Gate, the fourth and final dam in the Klamath Dam removal project, was breached. Salmon will now swim freely in the Klamath River for the first time in over a century, as the largest dam removal project in U.S. history nears completion.
This is a huge moment, not just for the environment and for salmon, but for also the tribes.
A national movement to let rivers return to their natural flows, restoring ecosystems for fish and other wildlife.
Everybody agrees that having clean, healthy sources of water for the environment and for people is a priority to everyone.
Coming up, a busy Labor Day weekend. What to expect if you're traveling? We're going to have that right after this. Many Americans are expected to travel today, starting off the busy Labor Day weekend. That's forecast to be even busier than last year. According to AAA, domestic travel will be up 9%. TSA is preparing to screen a record 17 million people now through September 4th at U.S. airports. With Friday expected to be the busiest, drivers can expect to see some relief at the pump. The good news, with prices averaging $3.36 today. Safe travels if you're going anywhere this weekend. And that's going to do it for us for this edition of the National Desk. We invite you to join us again this evening for reaction to Vice President Kamala Harris and Governor Tim Walz's interview on CNN. For now, I'm Didi Gatton here in Washington. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tonight.